Leah Mermelstein, so happy to be here with you today and to have a conversation around writing instruction. I feel like we are kindred spirits in this work, and I always love to come together with you and have conversations around all things instruction, but most specifically writing. With your latest book out, with We Do Writing, it's such a brilliant piece of work for professionals, like ourselves and anyone who's educators who are just looking for ways of really enhancing their writing instruction and kind of filling in those spaces and spots that are like, wow, I thought I gave enough support to be able to learn this, but I am seeing that support wasn't quite right. And so
Mhm.
you outline this whole model of um, actually taking something that can be quite complex, which is one of those things you're so good at, is taking things that are complex and creating teaching tools with this We Do model of instruction. And then your ability to facilitate the types of conversations that inspire teachers to evolve in their practices is also what you're known for. So with that all in mind, I'm so happy to be able to have this conversation with you today.
Me too, Patty. I am currently in vacation, but came out of vacation to talk to you about writing because to me, that's probably one of the most fun things to do, talk shop with you. So thanks for having me.
Yes, my pleasure. So let's just start off by talking about what you mean by we do writing. I know it's a collaborative type of writing. And if you could just define it a little bit for us and think and maybe share some things about collaborative writing or we do writing that are important to consider in the start of a school year.
Fantastic. So collaborative writing is a word out there used in many different ways. There's lots of ways that kids can collaborate when they're writing. But in my We Do model, I'm talking about a very specific kind of collaborative writing, and that's collaboration between teachers and students. And the purpose of it is to enable students to be successful with something that they wouldn't be able to be successful with yet.
Ah,
Um, and just to give and this can take on many forms in the classroom. In the book, I have lots of examples, but a few I'll just share now is there's an example where the teacher is working with the whole class. They're writing collaboratively, and they're writing a letter to the parents in that class asking if they'll donate math folders. So that's a kind of collaborative writing that is kind of sharing the work with the whole class. Another example I have in the book is a teacher working with a group of third graders during social studies. They're writing collaboratively. They've been studying Greta Thunberg, and now the kids are each writing their own piece about Greta Thunberg, which is deepening their knowledge of Greta Thunberg. But the teacher's also collaboratively working with them to use transition words to push their thinking a little bit further. The teacher's guiding them, working collaboratively. And of course, a teacher can work one-on-one with children as they apply what they've been learning to their own unique ideas. But the commonality between all three of those examples is that the teacher is working collaboratively with students to enable them to do something that they wouldn't be able to do on their own yet. So that's how I would define it.
mhm.
Um, and there's so many reasons to begin to think about using collaborative writing across the whole year, but especially at the start of the year. But I'll share three of my top three
Great.
reasons that I think that it's especially important in any year, but especially this year we're about to move into.
Mhm.
Um, so the first is confidence boosting. Any year, one of the things I try to do as a teacher is put myself into the minds of children
Yes.
and how they might feel when they're starting a year. And some children might feel super excited, and some children might feel super nervous.
Yeah.
And that's true of any year, but especially this upcoming year.
Mhm.
And so to begin the year by ensuring that students are successful
Mhm.
is going to boost their confidence. And I feel it's going to help them be able to tackle harder things later on in the year where they might not be successful. But
Yeah.
begin the year with success.
Yeah.
Number one reason. Second reason is to begin the year where children are. children are going to come in many different places. We can see the skills and strategies they need, and we can work collaboratively to enable them to transfer that into their independent writing. So it's a good way to look to see where children are and build those skills quickly. And the third reason is I think it's especially at the beginning of the year, a really good use of instructional time. When I was a new teacher, I thought writing instruction was my writing workshop. That was my writing instruction. So, I taught kindergarten and I thought, okay, my writing block is 45 minutes. And you can imagine, Patty, I said, let's do writing workshop for 45 minutes. Not a great use of instructional time because most of those kids could only write independently for 10 or 20 minutes. And so I really think it's a good use of time to think that, okay, I can have my writing workshop or my writing time, but I also can build that time by having more collaborative writing experiences with my students as well.
Yeah. It feels so like, what's that phrase? All for one and one for all, right? Like where everyone
Yes.
is invested in each other's learning. The teacher is obviously facilitating a major part of that, but that collaboration is like teamwork.
Yes.
And that feeling for students in the classroom being an important part of the team as they collaborate is really something so important. You talked about confidence building, and I think it also just establishes that sense of inclusion in the classroom, that when we do writing together,
Mhm.
we have this sense of community. And that's just beautiful and so needed in every classroom. So thinking about collaborative writing, you're talking about teacher supported writing. Are there different types of collaborative writing?
Yes, and that's something I talk a lot about in the book, and have been talking with teachers now as I begin to think about next year, being in person. So in the We Do model, I talk about 3 different types of collaborative writing sessions, each session having a different purpose. And when I was writing the book, and as I continue to think about the We Do model, I lean on the simple view of reading, that research. I also leaned more recently on Duke and Cartwright's active view of reading, which if you haven't seen that, it's just fascinating. Both of those are frameworks for thinking about what's important about reading. And so I leaned on those to help me think about what's important about writing and what types of collaborative sessions should be part of every elementary classroom. So the first one I talk about is interactive writing, which is a form of collaborative writing that's aimed at helping students with the encoding part of writing, with the language conventions, things like spelling, phonics, handwriting, phonemic awareness, punctuation. And so in those types of sessions, all we're working on together is the language conventions in interactive writing. A second type of collaborative writing session I talk about in the We Do model is I talk about write aloud. And write aloud, there was some really cool research I looked at while I was thinking about write aloud by Bodner and McLeod. It's called the production effect. And the production effect is talking about the idea of composing out loud, the idea of saying things out loud, which makes them stickier, makes them stick, which makes sense. But write aloud is really all about composing out loud at the sentence level. And we're helping kids put multiple sentences together, but really helping kids think about sentences rich in vocabulary, rich in grammar, and that we're working with kids on practicing those out loud with the hopes if they practice them out loud and compose them together, that those kinds of sentences, those kinds of rich sentences can become part of their independent writing. So completely different purpose. It's still collaborative writing, but this collaborative writing is focused on composing and practicing rich sentences out loud. And the third type of collaborative writing I call writing process. And that really is a bridge one, where you're bridging the language conventions and the language composition as kids bring together with you a short piece of writing through an abbreviated writing process. And so in each of those, I also can give different amounts of support to the kids as we work collaboratively. We could share the work, I could guide them through the work, or I could help them apply it on their own. And so in reality, there's 9 different types of collaborative writing there, because I can do each of those: shared, guided, or applied. And 2 tips, if I can, about doing them that I have found really helpful. One is to keep them short. And I keep them short because they're focused, because they're not focused on everything. They're focused just on one thing. And the second thing, which I think is super important, is to be careful not to over scaffold kids, where we're rescuing them from doing the work. But we also have to be careful that we don't under scaffold kids, where we're not giving them the support to be successful.
Yeah, that's really important. And it's just making me so curious too, because when you think about the 3 types of collaborative writing and then the different possibilities for those 3 types, it's like you have a whole buffet of possible ways of supporting student writers. And it's not, and we know student writers don't learn in a linear way. And so having so many choices in collaborative writing, it helps us meet students where they are as they're learning. And so it just feels so flexible and responsive.
No, it's one of the, for me,
helpful.
For me, it's been this simple tool for complex work.
Yes.
So it's a simple tool I can use, and I can put my focus on the students, the complex students, and really look at what are their needs. And then this simple tool can help you address their complex needs.
Yes, yes. That's reminding me of a quote. Is it Oliver Wendell Holmes says, "I'm looking for the simplicity on the other side of complexity."
Yes, yes. Absolutely.
I love that quote from him, because that is so much of what we do as teachers, right? Like we're looking at something so complex and we're working through it, and then finding that simplicity that comes after that complexity is really where that powerful teaching just is found.
Yeah, and I believe as a literacy consultant, and my role is to support teachers. And I really believe that one of the ways teachers deserve and need simple tools for the classroom. Their job is so complex that I really see it as my job to figure out simple tools for teachers, to nurture teachers so they can nurture students.
Yeah. Well, keeping that simplicity in mind, what kinds of simple tips do you have for getting started in the school year?
Oh, thank you so much. I think it's, I just did this work with 2 groups of teachers for next year. And it really is, we need simple ways to get started. And so I have 3 simple tips for getting started with this in the beginning of the year. And of course, teachers can do more than this, but this is enough to get started. And so my suggestion would be, number 1, pick a type of collaborative writing you want to try. So, for example, I was working with a group of kindergarten teachers last week, and they made the decision they weren't going to try all 9 of these. Too overwhelming for the beginning of the year. They made a decision that they're going to try to integrate shared interactive writing into their writing schedule in the beginning of the year, because they know that will support their kids in making that transfer with what they're teaching in phonics. So they chose interactive writing. Number 2, try it out in your literacy block. That's what they're going to do. Now they know, they put it into their schedule, so they feel like, yes, this is going to happen. Doesn't take a long time, 10 minutes, but they feel really excited. So number 1, they chose interactive writing. Number 2, they decided to put it into their literacy block. And number 3 is, I suggest trying it in another subject area. So for example, they're going to try it during social studies as well, during their family unit. I'm working with another 3rd grade group. They made a decision to try the writing process sessions because they really want to help the kids with paragraph writing. They're going to try it during their literacy block next year. But then once they try it in their literacy block, they're going to try it during social studies. And I am one of the things that I am really passionate about is encouraging teachers to have writing during their writing block, but have short collaborative sessions during other times of the day. There is so much research out there about the importance of building students' knowledge as a vehicle for reading comprehension. And so when we move, and one of the best ways that children can build their knowledge is by writing about what they're learning. And so by trying it out in a different subject area, you're getting kind of a 10 for 1 bargain. You're teaching them about writing. You are assessing their knowledge of the topic, and you are pushing their knowledge. You're having them think deeper about that. So 3 simple tips: choose one to try it in your writing block, try it in another subject area.
So you're making me really curious now about the possibilities in other subject areas. And obviously you've shared the importance that knowledge building is one of those things that just makes us stronger learners all around. It's like a win-win situation. So could you tell me a little bit more about how these can be done? How you can use collaborative writing in other times of the day.
Right. I'll give a few examples of the
Great.
ones that we talked about in my last meeting with teachers.
Perfect.
So for example, a group of 5th grade teachers I was working with, they know they're going to be studying young activists next year in social studies. And they're also going to be working on essays. And so they made a decision. Thesis statements are so challenging for kids. And you know why they're challenging? They're challenging because I need to understand the craft of writing one, but I also have to understand the information well enough to be able to have a sentence that kind of brings together everything I'm going to say in that essay. So these 5th grade teachers know that they are going to work on thesis statements during social studies in that way, because they will teach them about how to write one, but they also will push them in their thinking of those young activists they're studying. So that's going to be done during social studies. Well, a group of 1st grade teachers I was working with made the decision to do their interactive writing quite often during small group reading instruction. So for example, they are helping kids with short E's in reading, let's say. Well, they can really cement that in at the end of their reading instruction by having the kids write interactively a sentence or some words that will enable them to practice short E. It will really cement that. And in that situation, I almost think of interactive writing as a method for teaching reading.
Wow.
And the other place I really can imagine doing it is in response to reading. And so all of those ways, this is one of these kind of conversations I've been having with teachers, and really trying to, one of the things that's so exciting about being in person, hopefully next year, is really beginning to think. Cornelius Miner talks about the idea of not going back to normal, but going back to a better normal. And for me, one of those better normals is to think outside the box of my writing instruction. That sometimes it can be happening during my writing time, but it can be happening during reading, during social studies, in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And it acts almost like a glue, right? It just solidifies so much learning that's happening all over, but then we add in this collaborative writing, and it just really brings it all together.
Yeah.
And there's just so many possibilities with it. And also just want to say, kids love it. Like, they
Yes.
just love to be a part of this and collaborate in that way.
Yep.
So it's not just a sound practice and a practice that has so many possibilities. It's also something that kids are deeply engaged in because they just enjoy that experience so much.
There's 2 things that you said I would love to talk into a little bit. One is the idea of how the collaborative writing cements it together. I think it's a good reminder that the purpose of these collaborative writing sessions is to enable students to be able to do this on their own. The goal of this is transfer. And so by doing it in lots of different ways, we are keeping to that goal of, we're not doing collaborative writing. Yes, we're doing collaborative writing because we're all together and it's super fun, but in the end, we're doing collaborative writing so that children are able to do these things on their own in lots of different situations. So that's number one. The other thing that you said about it being deeply engaging for kids, it's so true. I think one of the ways we bring social studies to life and we bring reading to life is by writing about it, talking about it. I'm in the middle of taking my own course right now, and I've been blown away by, because all I'm doing is writing about what I'm reading, and I've been blown away by how the information has come to life in the act of writing about it. And so I really have been encouraging the teachers I work with to really think about doing collaborative writing, because it's going to make the content come alive.
Yes, absolutely. Well, I feel like I could talk to you forever about this. And maybe we will
Yes.
get together for coffee and continue this conversation.
Yes.
But just as a way to wrap it up for now, do you have any final thoughts to share as teachers are thinking about this, but also getting past that first month? So you gave us some tips for just getting started, keeping it simple, trying, small parts in certain places. As this really starts to become like a wonderful instructional practice that just begins to bloom in the classroom, what are some final tips that you have or thoughts that you have?
Thank you. Yes. So two thoughts I have. One is, as I begin to work with teachers and thinking about not just the first month of school, but across the year, one thing we've been thinking about is how to plan writing units, keeping collaborative writing in mind. So for example, when we're planning a unit now, we'll begin by thinking what topics, if we're going to be writing collaboratively during this nonfiction unit, or we're going to be writing collaboratively during this personal essay unit or this nonfiction unit, what shared topics will we write about? Because if we're writing collaboratively, we'll obviously have a shared topic. And so really thinking about what might make sense at that time of the year, what shared topic, to really anticipate as we plan the unit, what types of collaborative writing might we do? What might be our shared interactive writing during that time? What might be our guided writing process during that time? So to anticipate, of course, our kids will change it across the unit, but anticipating what some of those might be has been really helpful. Is really helpful. And the third thing is to think about kind of in those units, using the collaborative writing that's created as mentor texts for the children.
Oh my gosh, that's brilliant.
So often, and of course, there's beautiful mentor texts that other adult writers have published that we always use. Yes. But I also have been suggesting that we think about using the ones that we create with kids. And I think what it does is it creates a mentor text that they were part of the creation of. So in essence, it makes it stickier. And so I just have been really encouraging teachers to think about bringing that collaborative writing into their unit planning. And then finally, I think my final suggestion is I just, encourage teachers to approach this new year with a sense of a better normal. Quite frankly, in the writing of the book, I had to come to that hard reflection that my two go-tos in writing were modeling and independent writing. And it hit me that those are my two go-tos because that's what I liked to do. But when I took a hard look at the kids and the students that I worked with, those two go-tos were not enough to ensure that every child transferred. And so I encourage teachers to think about the idea of collaborative writing as a way to provide equal access, because you're giving all children the learning opportunities they need to become successful.
I have to say, your book, We Do Writing, is absolutely brilliant. I just devoured it when I read it. And just your way of sharing how simple, practical, and useful collaborative writing is and can be for kids is just not just remarkable in the way that you're able to do that as a as an educator, but also what a gift it is for learners. So thank you for sharing
Oh,
this
thank you so
with
much,
us.
Patty. I always love talking with you.
Yes, always love talking with you too.